Good evening, everyone. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Thursday, December 13th. It's about 4:05 p.m. Eastern Time. Little kinks for you. A well-respected man was number 13 on the charts back in 1966. Well, another day with a lot going on. I just want to see how we settled out. The Dow Jones finished down 74 to 13,171. S&P 500 down 8. NASDAQ down 21 points to 2992. All three indices down 0.6 or 0.7%. Yesterday I talked about waiting 24 hours to see what kind of reaction we would have with the Fed's moves and Ben Bernanke in his press conference. And thus far, the grade for the Fed is not good. Its actions continue to have little impact. The more they buy about 85 billion a month, their new transactions. But I want to start with the government budget deficit, which came in at 172 billion in November, up from 120 billion in October. A quirk in the benefits payments schedule apparently pulled 33 billion into November from October, so called 146 billion average for the first 2 months of the fiscal year. A deficit of 292 billion. So it looks like for the 5th straight year we're headed towards 1 trillion plus. You know, tax revenues, thanks to the improving economy, actually rose 10% in the first 2 months. But spending rose 16.6%. That's what it's all about. The Fiscal Cliff. Today, nothing happened. Nothing but President Obama and Speaker Boehner. I'm just looking for the headline. They are supposed to meet at the White House today at 5 o'clock Eastern. I'm just saying, if we get a stopgap deal by year end, and it'll be a minimal one, excuse my French, it's going to suck. And there will be zero cause for optimism in 2013. Zero cause for optimism that next year will yield anything better. I just don't see it. In Ben Bernanke's news conference yesterday, the chairman said clearly the fiscal cliff is having effects on the economy. This is a major risk factor right now. For its part, just to summarize again from yesterday, the Fed said it will keep rates at 0 until unemployment drops below 6.5%, which by their forecast is 2015. And under the new policy, the Fed will let its inflation outlook rise to 2.5% before taking action to curtail it in order to give the labor outlook more time to improve. Of course, that 2.5 compares to the 2% target we were told was the inflation target. But it's not as simple as just waiting until the unemployment rate gets to, say, 6.9% and then you get out of bonds, anticipating the move down to 6.5% on the unemployment rate, which would trigger Fed action. And what if we have 2 or 3 big inflation numbers in a row? So the new policy is designed to give business greater confidence and clarity as to how long rates will remain low, but in terms of the stock and bond markets, it's not that simple. Far more on this topic next week and in weeks and months to come. Again, including the whole deal with the Fed buying, the Treasury buying $85 billion a month, hiking the Fed balance sheet by $1 trillion a year. It's about $2.9 trillion now. It'll be $4 trillion by end of next year. According to John Taylor, an economist, the Fed is already buying 70% of the U.S. Treasuries. It's going to get explosive at some point. Maybe not for a while. But anyway, now I'm rambling. Okay, European Union leaders reached a landmark deal on centralized supervision of Eurozone banks. 150 to 200 of the biggest banks with assets greater than 30 billion euro or $39 billion will come under the direct supervision of the European Central Bank, which will act as chief supervisor of Eurozone banks, some 6,000 of them. However, national supervisors, national authorities will continue to monitor the smaller institutions, though the ECB retains the power to intervene. Germany had voiced various concerns, with Chancellor Angela Merkel welcomed the agreement, telling the Parliament, lower house of Parliament, that Germany's core demands had been met. The deal, though, won't take effect until March 2014, and only at that time, by my reading of the agreement, which is being wrapped up actually tonight in Brussels, only in March of 2014 can banks such as those on the periphery be recapitalized using the European Stability Mechanism, the ESM, which is the new rescue fund. So 2014 is going to be too late for some. But the point of putting off the starting date until 2014 is to get it past the German elections in September, and thus put off legitimate concerns about German taxpayers being saddled with an implicit guarantee for foreign banks. Meanwhile, Greece is getting its bailout cash, 34 billion euro within days, and a further 15 billion later on. Athens has been waiting on this since June. Congratulations to the Greeks, but that is far from the end of their problems. Mario Monti, current Prime Minister of Italy, is being urged to run again in next year's election, next February's, by leaders of Europe's center-right parties who got together before the banking summit. Former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi told the Financial Times, "All of us have asked him to stay. It is clear that the EPP, which is the European People's Party, the EU's center-right grouping, it is clear that the EPP is keen that Italy doesn't fall in the hands of the left like in France, where everyone is desperate and is running away because of the high taxes." Now, Monti hasn't said if he'll run. If he doesn't, Berlusconi will, and Berlusconi knows he'd lose because Monti is the only one who can unite the moderates at this point. In Syria, Russia's foreign ministry office admitted for the first time that President Bashar Assad's regime is teetering, while NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said he thinks the regime is on the verge of collapse. At least 91 people were killed in fighting nationwide in Syria yesterday, according to the British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. Most heavy fighting was concentrated in Aleppo and also the northern province of Deir el-Zor, where an international aid group said tens of thousands, many of them wounded, are trapped due to intense fighting and bombing. I just want to read, this is a little lengthy, but a story by Anthony Lloyd in Aleppo for the Times of London. Just an excerpt. Just a few weeks ago, the 2 million people living in Aleppo focused their survival on dodging shell fire and bullets on the streets. But today, as leading powers among the Friends of Syria group continue to meet in Marrakesh to talk about political transition and the deteriorating conditions, a freezing rain falls in a city without electricity, fuel, water, and phone links, where an abandoned people are sliding into an abyss, forced to devote their energies to the most primitive human search of all, the hunt for food. Cries of "We are hungry and give us bread" stalked my journeys down Aleppo's central streets, where beggary has become commonplace among the ruins, and glassy-eyed children huddle beside their parents around improvised stoves in an effort to keep warm. "We are sliding back into an ancient time," a man said by a street kitchen for the hungry in the Al-Shar neighborhood, where a daily bowl of pasta is handed out by local volunteers in the absence of outside help. "Assad is starving us just as Stalin starved his opponents. I beg you, tell the world what is happening here." One family that Mr. Lloyd came across had not eaten meat for 4 months and had not seen bread for 6 days. Having given up on the daily effort of queuing for 9 hours outside one of Aleppo's few remaining bakeries, and of course, Assad is targeting the bakeries. You might recall in October, the regime shelled a bakery in Aleppo, killing 22. In North Korea, U.S. analysts agree Pyongyang achieved a major breakthrough in its ballistic missile test. The cargo, probably a satellite, does appear to have achieved orbit, though there is debate as to whether or not it is a stable orbit. Few countries have put objects in orbit. This Unha-3 rocket also flew 6,200 miles, a range sufficient to hit the U.S. West Coast. But North Korea hasn't been able to miniaturize its nuclear weapons yet, or so we believe. In the short term, South Korea and Japan have far more to be worried about, specifically the North's short and medium-range ballistic missiles. But a question for next year is, will the U.S. give into another round of negotiations where we bribe the North with cash and food? And also, is the North preparing for a nuclear test? And oh, by the way, Iranian scientists, according to South Korean media, were present at the North Korean missile launch. China sent a small propeller plane marked State Oceanic Administration over contested islands in the East China Sea, a highly provocative act as it marked the first time ever that a Chinese aircraft invaded Japanese airspace. Japan scrambled 8 fighter jets in response. Once again, this is a dispute over what Japan calls the Senkaku Islands and China calls the Diaoyus, and the flight went over the islands. Beijing has long contested Japan's claim to the uninhabited islands, and when a Japanese patrol ship warned the plane not to enter Japan's airspace, the Chinese aircraft responded, "This is Chinese airspace." The Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman said the flight is, quote, completely normal. I mean, this comes just 3 days before Japan's election. Shinzo Abe, currently in the opposition, he's going to win, and he has promised a more confrontational approach towards Chinese aggression in the South and East China Seas. Yuka Hayashi of the Wall Street Journal summarized best the dangers. Understand that international law forbids entering another nation's airspace without permission and gives countries the right to expel unauthorized aircraft with force immediately. In contrast, foreign ships are able to sail through a nation's territorial waters as long as it is considered innocent passage. A professor at Osaka University told the South China Morning Post, "This is serious. Intrusion into Japan's airspace is a very important step to erode Japan's effective control over the area. If China sends a military plane as a next step, that would really make Japan's control precarious." A professor at Teikyo University, who's also a retired general, said the use of aircraft by both sides was significant. Something accidental is more likely to happen with planes than with ships. Finally, regarding Hugo Chavez, his inauguration is January 10th. It does not appear he will make it, which will potentially cause tremendous chaos in the country because his hand-picked successor, Vice President Nicolas Maduro, is considered to be a member of the radical left of Chavez's movement that is closely aligned with Cuba, and Maduro does not have the coalition support, including of the military, that Chavez has. I'll say Chavez is gone from the scene by January 30th. Texas Rangers superstar Josh Hamilton is signing a 5-year, $125 million deal with the Angels, according to late-breaking news. And that's it for tonight. I'm going to be back with you on Monday. Remember, I write Week in Review Friday. I post it early Saturday morning. Make sure to go to stocksandnews.com. Keep the men and women of our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. I'm Brian Trumbord. Take care. Have a good weekend.